Nabokov made a monster sound beautiful. And that's exactly the point. When you read Lolita, something uncomfortable happens. You find yourself leaning in. The prose is hypnotic. The sentences curl around you like smoke. And somewhere in the middle of it, you realize you've been listening to a predator narrate his own crimes and finding him charming. That's not an accident. That's not beautiful writing getting in the way of something dark. That is the darkness. So the question isn't whether Humbert Humbert is evil. The question is, how does someone like him see themselves? What does the world look like from inside a mind like that? And more unsettling, why does it almost make sense when he describes it?
There's a term in psychology called narrative self-construction. The idea is simple. We don't just live our lives. We tell them to ourselves. We build a story. We are the protagonist. Our choices have reasons. Our pain has meaning. Other people are supporting characters. Most of us do this in small, harmless ways. But in certain minds that researchers associate with psychopathy, narcissistic personality, or what some call the dark triad, this self-narration doesn't just distort reality. It replaces it. Humbert doesn't confess. He performs. And the entire novel is the performance. What we're going to do today isn't summarize what happens. We're going to go inside the architecture of that performance and look at what it was built to hide.
One of the first things you notice about Humbert's narration is how beautifully he describes the world. Not just Dolores Haze, everything. Hotels, roads, the light through a curtain. Psychologists who study narcissistic and psychopathic personalities often talk about something called aesthetic instrumentalization. The way certain individuals use beauty, art, or language not to connect with others, but to elevate themselves. The world becomes a gallery, and they are always the most interesting thing in it. Humbert isn't describing Dolores because he sees her clearly. He's describing her to disappear her. Every flowery sentence about her is a sentence that doesn't say her name, her real name, her actual self. He gives her a nickname. He gives her a mythology. He gives her the role of nymphette, a category he invented to make her feel less like a child and more like a force of nature. Because if she's a force of nature, he can't be blamed for being swept away. This is a hallmark of what researchers call cognitive distortion, the restructuring of reality to protect the self-image. But Humbert's version is so polished, so literary, that we almost don't catch it happening. And that's the question it leaves you with. If a distortion is beautiful enough, does it stop being a distortion? Most dangerous people in real life don't know what they are. That's actually what makes them feel safe to themselves. Humbert is different. There are moments, small, brief, quickly buried,
where he seems to see what he's doing, where the curtain slips. He knows she cries at night. He acknowledges, in passing, that she had nowhere to go. He knows. And this is where the psychology gets genuinely cold. Researchers who study psychopathy distinguish between two types of what's called empathy deficits. The first is cognitive empathy, understanding what someone else is feeling. The second is affective empathy, actually caring. Some people with psychopathic traits have near normal cognitive empathy. They can read a room. They can model someone else's pain precisely. They just don't respond to it emotionally. And in some cases, that knowledge becomes a tool. Humbert knows exactly where the wounds are. He uses that knowledge to control the narrative. Not to protect her, to protect himself. Every moment of apparent self-awareness in the novel is followed by a pivot back to his own suffering. His longing, his curse, his beautiful, tragic imprisonment. He can see her pain. He just finds his own more interesting. Which raises something harder to sit with.
Is a man who sees the damage he causes and continues anyway, is he more frightening than one who never knew? The novel is framed as a confession. Humbert is writing it, supposedly, while awaiting trial. He addresses a jury. He calls them ladies and gentlemen. He asks to be understood. But watch what the confession actually does. It doesn't make amends. It doesn't name what was taken. It doesn't speak to her. It speaks to us. It performs grief. It performs regret. It performs love. And this is where Nabokov does something that most writers wouldn't dare. He shows us how a predator builds his legacy. Because people with certain narcissistic and psychopathic structures don't confess to find peace. They confess to win. The confession is a final act of control.
If he can make us feel his suffering, if he can make us doubt ourselves for finding him beautiful, if he can make us argue about the book at dinner parties, instead of sitting quietly with what happened to a 12-year-old girl, then he won. He doesn't need to be forgiven. He just needs to be remembered on his own terms. And here is where the real discomfort lives. Not in the book, in the reader. Because we did lean in. We did find the prose extraordinary. We did, at moments, feel something like sympathy. Not because we're broken, but because that is exactly what he wanted. The text is a trap, and Nabokov built it on purpose. The question the novel leaves is not about Humbert. It's about what it means that the trap worked.
We don't get a clean ending here. That's intentional. Because the real question Lolita asks isn't one psychology can fully answer. It isn't about diagnosis or disorder. It's about how a person can stand inside their own destruction of another human being and
feel like the one who is suffering. And what it means that language, the same tool we use to reach each other, to say I love you, to write poems, to grieve, can be bent by one person in one book into the most elegant cage ever built. The girl in it had a name. Her name was Dolores. He called her something else. We've been using his name for her ever since. Next time, we're going into something different, but equally dark. We're looking at how real-life forensic psychologists have analyzed fictional characters, and what that tells us about the limits of diagnosis. If that sounds like something you want to sit with, I'll see you there.
If this video made you think, or made you uncomfortable, or made you want to read the book again with different eyes, consider subscribing. We don't do loud here. We don't do easy answers. We just go slow, and we go deep. If you know someone who thinks carefully about these things, share this with them. And if something in this video stayed with you, leave it in the comments. Not what you think about the book, what you think about yourself for having read it.